Thank you, Kate, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. As introduced, my name is Ellie Suzuki. I'm the COO of a nonprofit called Global Minimum. Before I introduce the remarkable speakers of the evening, I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about my organization as an example of an organization that really identifies, nurtures, supports the next generation of innovators and young prodigies. At Global Minimum, we ask ourselves the question, how do you transform young people from being the product of their own environment to problem solvers and solution providers of their communities and societies that they know best? How do you activate the inner potential and the inner creativity that every one of us has, but that has been suppressed by the society or untapped by the lack of privilege? At our organization, we believe that young people everywhere have the capacity to create solutions to improve their situation regardless of the background that they come from. We challenge young people to solve real-life challenges in their local communities and to come up with solutions through design competitions and makerspace that we provide. Currently operating in Sierra Leone, Kenya, and South Africa, more than 200 young innovators have invented solutions to pressing challenges in the world, from access to safe drinking water, access to electricity, access to sanitation system, to access to healthcare. But by utilizing their unique local knowledge and perspectives, these innovators have explored and developed unique solutions to new and old problems alike. We believe that this process of learning and making cultivates the next generation of young innovators. Now it's my very great pleasure to introduce our speakers for the evening. Greg Lindsay is a journalist, urbanist, and a speaker. He's a contributing writer for Fast Company and co-author of the international bestseller, Aerotropolis, The Way We'll Live Next. He's also a senior fellow of the World Policy Institute, where he's the co-director of the Emergent Cities Project. He's also a visiting scholar of New York University's Rudin Center for Transportation Policy and Management, and a research affiliate of the New England Complex System Institute. Greg is a term member of a Council of Foreign Relations. He's currently working with UCLA's City Lab to reimagine the economy and urbanism of the Ecuadorian Amazon. This is my favorite part. Greg is a two-time Jeopardy champion, and if I'm correct, the only human to go undefeated against IBM's Watson. Now I would like to introduce Tanishq Abraham. Tanishq is a science prodigy and a 10-year-old college student at American River College in Sacramento, California. He became a Mensa member at just 4 years old, a Davidson Young Scholar at age 6, and started college and public talk since he was 7. At 9 years old, with a perfect GPA, Tanishq became the youngest member of the International Honor Society, Phi Theta Kappa, and a vice president of communication at his college PTK chapter. He has published astronomy articles of the NASA website and is a founding vice president of the Astronomy and Physics Club at American River College. Last but not least, Dr. Dario, I want to pronounce it correctly, Gil is the director of Symbiotic Cognitive System and founding director of the Smarter Energy Research Institute at IBM Research, TJ Watson Research Center. Dr. Gil is a leading technologist and executive at IBM Research. As director of Symbiotic Cognitive Systems, he leads a strategy focused on the creation of a new generation of multi-agent learning system that can collaborate with people at the speed of thought. Dr. Gil is also the creator and founding director of the Smarter Energy Research Institute, an international collaborative research consortium focused on creating optimized energy systems through the use of big data, predictive analytics, optimization, and advanced computation. Tonight's topic is Youth Science Genius of Genius. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and thank you all for joining us tonight for the conclusion of 7 Days of Genius, which should be more accurately titled 10 Days of Genius. So we'll end the entire occasion with a wonderful conversation between a young scientist and a very young scientist one of whom is trying to give us all mental superpowers, and the other one who already possesses them. So if all goes according to plan, I will sit here and listen as keenly as you as the two of them converse on their favorite things. But as a way of getting started, gentlemen, I think the first thing I'd like to ask you both about is, I guess, sort of your passions in science. You're both scientists, one in training, I should say. You haven't gotten your PhD quite yet. But Dario, I guess I want you to first talk about the fact that, as you describe, your current work is in basically giving humans superpowers, and I wish you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so we're very interested in the creation of new generation of systems and machines that are explicitly designed to collaborate with people to enhance their cognition, right? So when we talk about cognitive systems, that is their explicit intent. So take, for example, a physician, right, who may be engaged in diagnosis. It's been a long time since any physician could read all the medical literature, right, that may be relevant for diagnosing a case. Mm-hmm. But now, if you could have a system that could process natural language and do all that reading for you, you still have to continue to do reading and keep abreast of your field. But you can have a symbiotic relationship with that system. So it would be very interesting to imagine a day where we are all equipped, right, with that sort of mental superpower capacity, and that imagine the power that would have across humanity.
And Tanishq, what are you into these days?
Right now, I'm really interested in nanotechnology, which is basically, it's about how to use materials and structures at the nanoscale, which is 1/1000th of a meter. Mm-hmm. So it's a field of science that at a very small scale, and nanotechnology has many subfields such as nanomedicine and nanoelectronics, and I'm really interested in nanomedicine, which is about how to use these nanostructures and nanomaterials in diagnosing diseases and also to cure diseases. So.
Interesting. Can you give me what have you been studying, or what do you think is the most interesting application of nanomedicine?
I think one of the really big applications of nanomedicine is diagnosing diseases. Like, for example, there are these tubes of carbon called carbon nanotubes, and carbon nanotubes have these interesting electrical properties. When biomolecules, which are usually indicative of different diseases, attach to the carbon nanotubes, the electrical properties of these carbon nanotubes actually change, and we can measure this change of electrical properties and use that to diagnose diseases.
Fascinating. So you just took a class on this?
Yeah, mostly in other fields of nanotechnology, like nanomagnetics, nanophotonics, and nanoelectronics.
But did you take it in the classroom, or did you take it online, or how are you taking classes these days?
Well, these days I'm taking classes actually online through a platform called Coursera, and I think online education is has a great future ahead. It's interesting how anybody can actually take online classes if they have internet access. And in the future, it would be nice to see more universities putting online courses, and also for online courses for credit. Mm-hmm. So then people can actually get college education at reasonable rates.
So who was your professor for this? Which I know Coursera has dozens, if not more than 100 universities around the world on its platform now. So who was your professor? What country were they in, or what school?
She's from actually. She's actually from. Of course, United States. Somewhere in the southwest, somewhere around.
Okay. So. Interesting. And so did you have much interaction with her then? Or was it mostly lecture?
It was mostly lectures. These courses are you just basically usually watch the lectures and then do the problem sets and the quizzes and the exams. But it was a nice experience.
Interesting. So Dario, how does this relate to how you went to school? Because I know you studied nanotechnology, right? That was how you began the field. So what was the state of the art in nanotech education, I guess, when you were going through school? And you know, I'm curious if you would ever imagine taking online courses now. Because
No, I would
it's
never.
Interesting.
It's amazing how quickly it has transformed, right? How the next generation is looking into getting educated in that field. Because for me, I still live more of an apprenticeship system, really, honestly. So of course, taking classes in college, but really what got me into the field was a professor at some point doing, you know, a summer research program who got me into the field of tribology, which is the study of friction, right, at the small scale. And I started using an instrument called the atomic force microscope, which I found absolutely fascinating, right? The ability to sort of image atoms at that scale. And that's what allowed me sort of a sense of wonder of the possibilities of the Feynman plenty of room at the bottom, right? This whole universe, and how do you fabricate at that scale? How do you see it? And that's what got me really motivated to go to grad school, to the nanostructures laboratory. And, you know, for me it was a mode of learning that was a combination of classes, but what really made me, you know, a researcher and a scientist was being taught by a practicing scientist, right? And a community of other graduate students, right, who were doing experiments together. So I think that's still gonna be the case, but it's amazing the opportunity that it offers, right, to be exposed to ideas and classes at a much earlier age and much more democratic in nature. But I still believe that there is an aspect of sort of a community of scientists coming together, right, that has continued to prove powerful.
Well, Tanishq, you had a mentor at first, right? If I recall, there was a geologist who was sort of that person who really helped you get a foot in the door into taking college courses. How did you get your start into college?
Well, he was one of my first professors. Because of him, I'm able to go to college. So around 6 years old, I wanted to take college classes. I was really interested in paleontology, which is the study of fossils. And I really wanted to take a paleontology course. So I pestered my parents so that I can take college courses, but unfortunately, I couldn't find a professor. My parents couldn't find a professor willing to have me, and for a year we couldn't find a professor who was willing to have me. But then finally, when I was 7, my parents found a geology professor who was willing to have me as a student, and I did pretty good. And then and then he actually helped me to actually become a actual student there. And finally, he helped me in my education, and also he let me talk at his work at his.
So how do you feel about, you know, working with a professor and learning in person versus online courses? I mean, which do you prefer at this point? Because I would tell you that I would agree with Dario that the importance of learning with other people, but then I remember I hated going to college, so I don't know if that's necessarily true. So what's your preference? Because you have a choice.
Well, I like online learning because you can actually go at your own pace. You can go as fast as you want, or you could go as slow as you want. So online learning is good for both students who are having trouble learning and also for students who want to accelerate. Classes at the like college courses at campus are going at a specific pace. So so if you feel like it's going too fast, you can't really do anything apart from dropping out. And if you feel it's going too slow, you're just going to have to deal with it. But online courses, you can go at the speed you want to go at. So.
I was going to say, I think that feeling of drowning is really part of the hallmark of the college experience. Well, Dario, I want to come back. What originally got you inspired in nanotech and in the field? What was your inspiration at that moment? Because you probably were bored in school, and you probably did have to endure that. So I'm curious how you survived that boredom that way.
It's interesting because, like, the engineering education or science educations, it seems like it was formulated, it continues to be formulated in a way that it's like a delayed pleasure, right? There's a lot of classes that you gotta take to get to a certain capability before you get to really enjoy it. And I think that's a pity and an interesting opportunity for, you know, rethinking of how education can happen. But if you stick enough, right, at some point, right,
Yeah.
you start having enough skill, enough capability, and somebody will take you under their wing or inspire you in some way that you can really take off. And for me, it was seeing those scanning electron microscope images of this small world, right? And just seeing a world I had never witnessed with my own eyes. And I thought it was so beautiful, right? And I was inspired by all of that aspect, and and then figuring out how do you create things there, and I became very interesting also in quantum mechanics and the strange phenomena that happens at the small scale. So all of that sort of fed on each other and it cascaded, right? And but I think it really started by seeing. It's kind of like in astronomy, right? Seeing some images of a world you don't normally see, whether they're very big or they're very small, is something that triggered my imagination.
So I want to ask you both the question this way. How did you feel about your English classes and your humanities classes, and do you even take any? Because America, we hear that that you two are the exception, that we're falling behind in STEM and science, technology, and I can't remember the E and the M. And then we're following medicine is the M. I can't remember the E. Engineering and medicine. You can tell that I was in fact an English major. I thought that's what the E was. Is it math? It's math. See, math. I took one course of college calculus and got out. And so my question is, you are the exceptions to the rule. Do you think that we need to spend more time in those fields? I know I certainly do. I just proved it. But what about the rest of people? And do you think how would you tailor your own curriculum at this point? You're basically teaching yourself through this collection of classes. So what are you learning from right now, and where do you feel weak? What do you think you should be learning?
Well, I really haven't taken much English courses, but my parents wanted me to take some English courses. I'm not a big fan of English, but it's needed. So I would certainly take a few English courses, but I'm not a big fan of it.
I guess my question is, and my question for you, Dario, is he alone in that, or do you think we should all be taking less English and more sciences? Because you're the one working for, just my random factoid is that IBM produces 30% of all the patents in the United States year after year after year. And so we have one company that produces that. So you get to work with the best scientists in the world, but I'm curious what you think about, the other scientists you come into contact with, or the state of education now. Should we be formulating a policy in this one? I guess I'm going to ask you to stand in for the scientific community and give a ruling on this.
Yeah, but on the topic of the humanities and science, I don't think that we gotta make such a drastic distinction, because in the end, not only are you a scientist, but you're a citizen, right, of the world, and you're a parent, and all of those elements, you need to be a well-rounded individual, right, to be able to interact with the world and understand the society you live in. So it's extremely advantageous to be able to communicate effectively, to be able to convey your ideas, concisely. So those are skills that you learn, with the rest of the domains and the humanities. But as for the broader scientific, attracting scientists, say in the United States, to pursue those careers, it's a challenge but I don't blame entirely only the students who don't pursue it. I think there is something about the difficulty associated before you get rewarded and get to enjoy the science and the engineering that is part of the system that is at fault. So somehow we need to not tell people you have to take 6 courses of calculus and 5 courses of physics and chemistry before you understand why this has value. If we did that, I think we would increase the number of people who participated on it, right? Today, I think it relies a lot of parents, who maybe impose some pressure. You're either naturally gifted about it, or you're really interested in it, or there's some kind of familial pressure, like you see your parents. Maybe one of them was a scientist or engineer, and you have a role model, and you wanted to do that, or you have an innate passion. But it's not one of those things that you just fall into. It's like, I didn't know what to do, and I ended up doing physics, right? It doesn't typically happen.
Yeah. Well, Tanishq, you're taking actual college courses now. So do you actually find the classes fun? I think most people would argue that class was not the fun part of college. So, do you find yourself, as someone who's so passionate about these subjects, do you find yourself in the college course being like, come on, this could be so much more fun than the way they're teaching it? Or how do you, what do you think of college as it's taught now?
Well, for me, it's the opposite. The classes are the fun part of college, and I think that, in one way, the classes can be boring for some students. I think that we need to improve the way we teach these classes. We need to have better textbooks and definitely decrease the price of those textbooks. and we need to make it more hands-on so that it will be more fun. I think we really need to make science more hands-on, more labs. So.
Well, what's an example of that? So you told me a story, there was an interesting story where you went to NASA Ames and you helped basically crowdsource some scientific research, which I think is interesting because that's something that we never ever got to do either. That was always the domain of the experts. So can you talk a bit about that? I mean, you're already doing scientific research, which I think is interesting and unprecedented.
Yeah, I've been using this program called Zooniverse, and Zooniverse has these multiple astronomy projects, and it also has medicine and humanities projects, but its major focus is on astronomy. And I was able to actually introduce this platform to the public and get them interested in this platform. There's so many projects out there on Zooniverse. Like one of the ones that I was really interested in was Planet Hunters, where we look for these planets outside our own solar system. There are actually trillions of planets out there, not in our solar system, but out there in the galaxy. And some of these planets could harbor life. So that was a really interesting project. But when I went to NASA Ames, I was actually the project that I was crowdsourcing was Moon Zoom, which is basically a project to map the surface of the moon. So then we can pinpoint an area to land our manned spacecraft. So.
That's great. So did you pick a spot?
Well, the point of the project.
Where should I be investing in moon real estate is my question.
Well, the project is more like you look for boulders and craters, and then there are actually scientists behind the project that put all this data together and use that to map the moon and figure out a place. So.
Interesting question. I have a question for the audience real fast before we go into this, because I have a question. Your interest in space makes me want to ask this question. How many of us think the United States will mount a manned mission to Mars in any foreseeable time frame, let's say 35 to 50 years? Does anyone believe that we will? See, we have one in back. I'm glad we have one. All right, we see here, and the youth shall lead us. Finally, we have some optimists. So that's my question for you, Tanishq. Do you think would you ever have any interest in going into space? I mean, I don't know if I ever grew up wanting to be an astronaut, but I don't think kids grow up wanting to be astronauts these days. And I'm curious your interest in space. Do you want to be an observer here? Do you want to go into space? Do you think we should go into space, or is that for robots?
So, I would like to go to space, but yeah, I definitely like to go to space, but that was not how I became interested in astronomy. I wanted to learn about our solar system. When I was in preschool, I was taught about the solar system, and I became more interested in the solar system, and from that it became my interest in astronomy. So being an astronaut was not how I became interested in astronomy. And I do think that right now we should send both humans and robots to the moon and to other places like Mars. But because right now humans have better cognitive ability than robots, but in the future, with what Dr. Gil is working with, robots may have better cognitive abilities than humans, and then we should only send robots.
Well, Dario, so we still talk in terms of I guess we talk in terms of Manhattan projects, but also Apollo programs and moonshots. I mean, Google has its moonshot program, for example. That's still the definitive way to talk about this. What is the next moonshot? I mean, we already had the Human Genome Sequencing Project, which was probably the last grand one of that. IBM has all sorts of grand challenges in its own mind. Watson was one out of that. But what's a civilizational grand challenge, I guess, or what do you think is the next frontier of
Understanding
science?
the brain. it's a big project, and I think it's being recognized, right, by funding agencies around the world, both in the United States and in Europe and Japan. There's very large scientific initiatives around trying to understand the brain, trying to create a connectome, right, which is sort of like the neurological mapping of all our synapses and neurons in the brain. So I think that offers tremendous opportunity to both understand the implications that creates for us as humans, consciousness, all sorts of neurological diseases that will be important, but also as an inspiration, for us that we're working on information technology to create a new generation of systems that have inspiration, right, for how we do. Because despite the incredible success of a machine like Watson, one of the things that is amazing when you see the machine compete with the humans, a lot of people are focused on the machine, but you look at the humans, you say, wow, that's extraordinary. Like, look at what they're able to do, right, with just 20 watts, right? And there's something that we know we're not doing right compared to what biology has produced. So I think that is an area right now for scientific study that is just in a renaissance, and I think it's going to have tremendous impact. So I think that's what's next.
So Tanishq, if you had a Watson at your fingertips, if you had an assistant Watson, or apply Moore's law and IBM programming, and you get a 20 times smarter Watson, what would you do with it, or what would you want to do with it? I mean, most of the people in this room grew up without having Google at their fingertips to answer any query they had any time or day of night, and you're going to get to grow up with Watson doing the same, or any sort of equivalent AI. So have you thought about, I guess, sort of how you can imagine using that sort of thing in terms of what you would get it to do for you or think about on your behalf? What if you had an external brain? An extra one?
Well, I think that machines like Watson can have a big impact in medicine, especially in diagnosing diseases. These machines like Watson can probably process data a lot better than humans, and I think I definitely use Watson for diagnosing diseases. I'd use the Watson for like maybe image processing, or for a better version of Google, because these AI machines can be also used for searching, and so those are a few areas that I would use AI machines.
Nice. So you both know what the singularity is. I assume you know what the singularity is. Does everyone in the room know what the singularity is? This is an idea that Ray Kurzweil has floated. It was a long, old-school artificial intelligence. He's basically arguing that, I think it's always perpetually 15 or 20 years away, or he claims to have it. There will be a moment where the machines become self-aware. They will become smarter than us. And that's sort of the moment where all of human history as we know it will break. That is the singularity, where we will enter some whole new future. And if you talk to Ray and others, it's basically a sort of church for them. And so I'm curious, do you both think the singularity will happen? You're arguably working to help make it happen, but do you think the singularity?
I heard the other day a hilarious joke about it, that they would call the singularity was the rapture for nerds. And
the moment we ascend to our cloud in the sky.
Right, exactly. So I don't fully subscribe to the whole thing. I do believe in the idea of progress, right? And I do believe on the idea that we can create, technology that can help us overcome some of our limitations that we have. I'm particularly interested in the area of overcoming limitations around decision making, right? Because we will be hard pressed to say that we're making optimal decisions on every front, at every level of society. So I do think we need help, and it will be very interesting to create systems that help us along those lines. As to a whole future in which the singularity occurs and we upload ourselves to a cloud, that gets downloaded in the future, that escapes me at this point. But maybe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. That I don't.
You don't believe in your own immortality? I'm sad to hear that.
I do not like that idea of singularity. I mean, it's like the world will be taken over by machines that think like brains. It's like the gray goo situation.
Explain the gray goo problem.
Well, the gray goo problem is when self-replicating machines take over the world. It's the singularity is kind of similar to that kind of
but they don't take over the world. They turn everything into another self-replicating machine. So the whole world becomes gray goo as the machines eat everything. It's the worst outcome.
So the singularity is kind of similar to that. Like the machines take over the whole world. Everything becomes like a machine. Like I don't believe in that idea. I don't think that will ever happen. So.
Well, what are you hopeful about, and what worries you? Because I think a lot of people in this room would argue or believe the world is getting worse, and that the climate change will happen, politics will doom us all. I mean, we're in a tense situation with Russia, which still has nuclear weapons, which was the great fear of my childhood. What makes you optimistic about the future, and what keeps you up at night? Although you're a little young to be kept up at night.
Well, I do. I do. I don't go to sleep very fast, so.
All right. So when you're lying there in the long wee hours, what worries you?
I really don't think about what worries me. I just think about the optimistic future. I don't care about what worries me. It's important. If you have an optimistic attitude, the world will become better. So.
Well, what are your grand challenges then? Dario's got almost 30 years on you as a scientist. So you have a long career ahead of you at the very least. So what do you think will be the big challenges do you think will be conquered in your lifetime? Do you think we'll cure cancer? Do you think we'll, extend human lifespan beyond 100 years? Is there anything you'd personally like to see, or do you think it'll happen?
Yeah, those are a few examples that I think will happen. Like, we will be able to probably cure most of the diseases that are affecting us, like malaria, tuberculosis, and of course cancer. And we may be able to live past 100 years, or maybe even 200 years, but that may not be in 30, 40 years. That may be in about 100 years from now. But all this is possible. But we have to wait, because you need a lot of research and development to do this. So.
Yeah. Interesting. One last question. I'll start thinking about questions from the audience here, because we're going to open this up in a minute. But one question I have is that it's interesting, as being here in New York on the East Coast, we hear enough about Washington and the problems in Washington facing America. And then, on the West Coast, you guys are, the optimists. Well, you're in New York, but, come on. It's a state of mind when you're in the technology field. But you're on the West Coast. And, there's this real optimism that technology, will triumph, and that reason will triumph, and that we'll get things done. And I'm curious your thoughts on sort of, what we need to do as a country in terms of education, what we need to do in terms of science funding. We were, discussing beforehand, about big data, and I was making the point that big data is simply a new way to go through old data, which, is very much in the mind. It's very much the mindset. It's when you're doing science on the cheap, you just basically go through old requests. So what would you do if you were made president for a day? What would you do in terms of science funding and other programs in education, both of you?
Well, yeah, I definitely improve our education system. Like, I'm having a lot of problems with my education. Like, my major problem is that I can't really advance in my education, and that's definitely something I'd like to improve. I bet there are many students who want to advance and want to learn more, but they just can't because the schools won't let them, and that their schools are not ready to have students like that. And that was the major problem when I was in public school. They wouldn't let me advance. Like, I wanted to skip a few grades, they wouldn't let me in. I had lots of problems. So and also with college now, I can't really take a lot of courses. I'm limited to take only 2 courses. So that's a big problem that I'd like to fix in education.
Right. And what about you?
I would say one priority I would take. I have 2 daughters, and I would love to have a greater emphasis of creating programs to foster girls to be able to go into science and to be able to see more role models and more of a focus, so that we can benefit from the talent of both genders, right? In doing that, I would say that would be my priority.
Great. All right. Well, do we have any questions from the audience now? Certainly, we must have someone. Anyone? All right. Well, the young lady first, and then the gentleman in the front. Go ahead.
What's the hardest part about taking college courses and not going to elementary school?
Well, the really big thing again about going to college is that I can't advance, and so that is really a big problem both in school and in college. So that's probably the biggest problem I have.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, two questions. First is, how do you socialize with other people your age, being that you do with taking online classes at home?
Well, I go to the San Francisco Boys Choir, and over there I have a few friends, and I play with them. We like to play planes all the time, so we have fun, and so I do get a lot of socialization. Especially I have a sister, and I get to play with her, and so yeah.
Add on to that, do you email or do you talk to any other scientists? I mean, there was a saying once, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog, and no one knows you're a 10-year-old college grad either. So
yeah, that's a big thing. Like I took classes once. I took a chemistry class, and my professor didn't even know I was a young student. So, but yeah, I sometimes do write to scientists that I'm really interested with, and yeah. I do have Twitter accounts and I have a Twitter account and a Facebook account, and I use that to interact with other people. So
you should follow him right now. You had another question, sir.
The other question is, you're in California, correct? Okay, here in the state of New York, they have advanced placement tests that you can take. So, for example, to be exempt from college classes, you can take CLEP exams. Do they have anything like that in California, so that you could just take an exam and be exempt from the course and get the credits that way?
they do, but I haven't really used that because I just really haven't used that. I mean, there's a way you can skip high school. You can take a test to skip high school, and I have to.
It's called the GED, but you've got to be.
I can't take that course. I can't take that. But there is a test that I'm trying to take that will let me just skip high school, and that will definitely help me. So then I can become a full-time student. So.
Okay, they have it here that if you complete 2 years of college, you automatically get your high school diploma.
They don't have anything like that.
You would have looked into it.
State of California, ladies and gentlemen. We have a question over here.
Just in general, right? So you had mentioned about Washington and how about funding. My concern is that looking at the news, you actually see this sort of anti-science attitude in some parts of the country, and so wanted to find out what are your thoughts on how we can fix that, right? Because again, it's wonderful if you can have the money and you can have private funding. However, most of the funding comes from the government, and if you have this anti-science faction, how does that make us whole as a nation?
Yeah, so you have states that are making science illegal in areas like climate change.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think one of the things we all have to do as citizens, whether we're scientists or not, is to speak up and defend that, right? Because in some of these things, not all points of view are equally valid, right? And it's kind of depressing to see some things, for example, around global warming and what has happened, even though as there's more and more evidence. The more and more evidence there is, there seems to be some trends in the United States where public opinion is going backwards in the understanding of it, and that's outright depressing, right? So somehow I think we have an obligation to really be able to speak up and defend things, right? And I don't know any other way, because otherwise there'll be some forces that will run counter to it.
Now, when you were saying about global warming and there's more evidence, the thing that there was actually no debate about whether global warming is there. The debate is how it's happening and how to fix it. So we don't need any more evidence for global warming. It's just how can we fix that? And also, we can fix this anti-science attitude by actually showing how fun science can be, through hands-on activities, and show how we use science every day. For example, our computers are and all electronics are based on based on physics, and we use science all the time. We need to show that science is that we use science all the time, and that science is fun. So that's how we should fix that problem.
It's a reminder to start watching the new Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, there you go.
Question in the back.
Isn't that the exact reason why you should be doing more humanities, so that you understand politics, so that you can respond to the scientific problem?
An excellent riposte. I don't know. I agree with you. But I don't know if we can get into that from here. Other questions? Unless you want to tackle that, but yes, we have one here.
How did you originally become excited about science?
Well, I've been passionate about science since I was 4, I think. When I was in preschool, I said that I learned about the solar system, and I was really interested in astronomy. And then later on, when I was in kindergarten, I learned about paleontology, and I really wanted to learn about paleontology. And then from there, it expanded to other fields of science, such as biology and chemistry. And since I was really interested in paleontology, from there, I wanted to learn more about paleontology. And then, since I figured out that that I can't take high school courses or anything like that, and that those are all so basic, I decided to take college courses. And from there, that's how I became a college student.
Was there a moment that you remember?
Well, when I was in preschool, I just started reading books and a bunch of stuff. Since I had the internet back then, I just started researching and Googling about astronomy. And then later on, when I started becoming interested in paleontology, I found out about this talk on paleontology in UC Berkeley, and I decided that I wanted to go there. And my parents took me over there, and I met this professor, and he encouraged me to learn more. And from there, I became interested in paleontology and took college courses. Yeah.
Great. I think dinosaurs have made more people scientists than any other subfield.
That's true.
Any other questions? Well, I have one for you fast. The New York Times Magazine just did a story on the scientists who are trying to bring back the woolly mammoth using samples and cloning. And this is something that gets talked about all the time, cloning. And I think most people feel very, very afraid of it. And I'm curious, someone who's your age, you haven't had any adult preconceptions about it. How do you feel about cloning, or bringing back dinosaurs, or bringing back the mammoth?
I think it's a nice project, and that, I don't feel anything bad. I don't feel anything bad about cloning it.
I know, it's just another research project.
Well, right? But bringing back dinosaurs, that I'm not sure about.
In the sense that they're carnivores, or they wouldn't adapt very well?
Yeah, I don't think so.
All right, other questions? We have one on this end now. I think
maybe if you could somehow find a way to merge religion and science, take specific examples, like if you could explain how Moses parted the seas, or Jesus turned wine into water. Maybe just focus on those two things and you explain it then.
Well, I would say we'll have to get some eyewitness accounts for that one and some historical records, because without carbon dating, it's a little hard to do from backward doing it. Other questions? Yes.
Dr. Gil, Dario. I've known Dario since he's 13 years old, and I know he has a very well-rounded education and many, many interests, but I don't know how you did end up going into engineering. Who inspired you? Because I know that neither parents has a background. Who was it, or what happened?
For me, I had strong interest in my family. I would say is much closer to the humanities, and artists and architecture, and that was how I was raised more. But I always had a strong interest also in science, and it was for me a more conscious decision actually, that I felt if I didn't go into science, that's probably not one of those areas that I would pick up on my own with the level of rigor I would want, where I felt I would continue reading. I think I would continue being interested in the humanities just because of my upbringing. So I think that was more like the choice I made deliberately because I wanted to maintain a strong foot on both worlds. And so I didn't benefit from like the inspiration and the talent at such an early age. So for me, it was come late.
Other questions? Yeah, Elliot.
What do you think we can do more to ignite the interest in science? I know Tanishq, for example, alluded to hands-on labs, for example.
Yes.
What would you say to that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think being more hands-on, right? If you get an opportunity to, somebody who is practicing or programs where you get to experiments, it could be in science museums, but any chance where you get to experiment hands-on and see the wonders of how the physical world happens and works or biology is a chance to inspire people, right? And I think science is being made much more accessible. I mean, through online, but experientially, there's something powerful about that, like physically experiencing those moments. So that's what, I think is the biggest barrier of entry.
Tanishq, I'm curious. So when you have a lot of online platforms. Do you ever go to any maker spaces or hacker spaces or anything like that to play with circuitry and robots or anything like that? Because that's a really popular thing to do these days.
Really, I have been to a few hacker spaces, but like once I went to a hackathon, but I really didn't build anything. I just went there to learn, but I haven't really been to hacker spaces to like actually play around. I do have like an Arduino, which is this kind of computer to bridge the control different electronic devices, and I've played with that, like played with LEDs and different and made different electrical circuits, but yeah.
Yeah. Not the total thing that lights your fire.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, on advancing that, like last year I got a chance to meet Dean Kamen, and he has this wonderful program called FIRST, right? And one of the philosophies he's trying to inspire is to treat, the next generation of scientists and engineers as rock stars, right? And to celebrate them, right? And bring people together and brings people stadium, and he's able to bring like, U2 to play for them, and the winners go to the White House. It's about, celebrating, like Tanishq and, all the kids who are interested in science and engineering, and that we all embrace them, right, in that way. And I think that has a very powerful effect as well.
Other questions? One in the back here.
Yeah, and I actually shouldn't, but I guess my question is, as we all know, a lot of science funding has disappeared from our government over the course of time. And you are in a company that has benefited greatly from governmental spending in the past. Do you think that perhaps scientists speaking up and pointing out what Americans and the world has now, just because of things that were funded that they didn't see any use for at the time, could be helpful in making people to realize that, oh, science has done this, and it was all because they just wanted to know about that. And I'm just wondering if that could be helpful, especially when you come up with some new idea to point out, well, this came about because of this, and this particular piece of funding.
Yeah, to celebrate those connections, right, from the past. No, I completely agree. And I agree that, I think government plays a crucial role in funding, fundamental science, and is actually one that is willing to take, very significant risks. And you would say, well, the private sector also takes significant risk. But there's a certain class of really hard problems, right? For example, non-software oriented programs, right? Where only society at large, through an instrument like government is able to actually amass enough resources and have that willingness, right, to whether do a space exploration or, or fund very basic research that actually you don't find in the private sector. So I think that it's a very good point, and it's a key component of a rich and successful society to be able to do that. And I agree that making those connections and celebrating those investments that we make as citizens is very important.
Tanishq, what do you want to do when you grow up? I mean, you mentioned you want to
The
get an
dreaded
MD.
question.
Well, you mentioned you want to get an MD. You mentioned you want to get a PhD. And so I'm curious. I mean, what do you see yourself doing in the future? Do you want to work with people in a practice? Do you want to be a corporate scientist? Do you want to do academia? I'm probably sure you don't want to do academia, but you're too young to be disillusioned. But yeah, what do you see in terms of what lab you'd like to be in, or what clinic?
Yeah, this is a typical question.
I'm a typical moderator.
Well, I want to become a doctor, of course, and a scientist. I want to really become a medical researcher, and also, I want to also become the president of the United States. And yeah, I'd like to have my own lab, but
Maybe in the White House. You can have your lab.
I would say first you need to pick up a JD, and then you need to be good at writing grants. That's the most useful adult skill you'll have as a medical researcher. Other questions?
Have you met other people similar to yourself?
Well, not really. I mean, I've contacted a few people who are interested in science too, like kids who are interested in science, and yeah, I've heard of other kids who are really interested in science, but I've not really met them, but yeah.
Because one suggestion is, if you can find enough people similar to yourself, maybe you can create your own university or your own school and bring in professors or instructors to help advance your education.
Or I'm thinking like superhero team with Dario as Professor Charles Xavier. Like this has X-Men written all over it. Yes, question in the back.
So obviously a lot of education is determined in the classroom, but so much of what kids are interested in comes from the adults in their lives. So of course, if you can get more adults interested in science and thinking about it, I'm sure you're going to see that reflected in children as well. So when you're talking about the genius of genius, do you guys know of any programs that work to increase science education in adults, or science interest, or science programs in adults?
Oh, in adults, interesting.
You
That's I guess.
Can you teach old dogs new tricks? Yeah.
I guess that's the goal of the new Cosmos series. For example,
Yeah.
things of Nova and PBS. I mean, I guess television has had some tradition of doing that.
But yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if we're smart enough to actually answer that one up here.
It's a good question.
But definitely we need to teach adults also about science, and learning is not just for kids. You learn through your whole life, so it's important.
Well, we're about to wrap up. There's time for one more question, but I want to ask one more to each of you, which I think is appropriate for concluding 7 Days of Genius, which is, do you think genius is innate? Were you both born with your abilities and that's all there is to it? Or how much can you expand them? How much can you augment them from a non-machine perspective? How much are we born with our potential at birth, do you think?
I think that it's both innate and you also learn it. So, that's what I really think. You have to develop your skill. You have to improve it. So you just can't be. You just don't sit there and say. You just can't just. You have to improve your skill. So.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? And I actually think the nature of genius is very multifaceted, right? And what is interesting is on the opportunities that we can have to have also collective genius, right? I mean, some would say some of the founding elements, for example, the United States was an act of genius that then empowers many people, right, to express that potential. So I think that's what's most appealing, right? There's not just a scientific aspect to it, but it's our ability to inspire each other and organize it so we can reach that potential. But I think it's a balance of the two.
Great.
So before we end, I would like to say how much my family has helped me. I mean, my mother was a veterinarian, and my father is a software engineer, and my mother stopped working because to educate me and my sister, and my sister also has helped me too. She's been my biggest fan, and so I'd like to So, yeah.
You're going to give a great acceptance speech someday.
Yes.
Can I have a hand for our guests tonight? Thank you so much.